Now moving on to the elbows. So now with the limbs, what we're going to do now is simply rotate and articulate the elbow in this fashion. So you can do one arm or both arms, it doesn't matter. So you start with less exertion and then gradually increasing the amount of tension that you put in the elbow. So you want to lock out the arm and then bring it in as far as possible as well. Okay, so you can also start to incorporate the wrist in this exercise by rotating the wrist while you're rotating at the elbow. So you see as Victoria is actually rotating the wrist in this fashion as you rotate with the elbow. Okay, you can also switch directions here. So again, as we do in all of these exercises, very slow movements and making sure that you are engaging the muscles. The idea here is to actually warm up the muscles by using them, so you are applying strength while you're doing this. Gradually increasing the resistance, but strength nonetheless. And moving on down to the ends of the arms, so now the wrists. So in this case, we're going to clasp the hands together and simply start forming this figure eight movement, nice and easy, very slow with the hands. So as you notice, one hand is actually going to be a controlling hand and the other is going to be a little bit more passive. So it's still a warm-up, but you're also getting a good stretch out of the wrist. The wrist has a very large range of motion, so you want to make sure that you maximize that. Okay, so in this case, you can also go in both directions. You'll find it might be a little bit weird to go in one direction and easier to go in the other. It's a good practice as well. It's going to help to increase your body feel. So we finished the head and the arms. Let's move on now to the torso. So in order to articulate the spine, what we're first going to do is simply twist our body. So you want to make sure that your feet are planted and the hips stay more or less stationary. In this case, you can hold your arms or not, doesn't really matter. From here, you simply want to turn in one direction and in the other. So your head will follow your arms while you're doing this. So again, you want to make sure that you're not bouncing with this movement. It's not a ballistic movement. Very slow, very deliberate, using your core muscles to turn your body. Of course, making sure that we are keeping a nice natural posture, curvature in the spine while we're doing this. Again, if you feel pain, make sure you don't go to that range of motion. Only go as far as you feel comfortable with this. Continuing with our torso, our spine articulation, now we're going to go into this reaching series. So first you're going to start with your hands overhead. So in this case, it sometimes helps to have the hands together just to give you a little more stability. So from here, what we want to do is extend the arms all the way back as though you're reaching for something that's behind you. While you reach, you want to exhale, and then you're going to reach forward. So when you reach forward, you want to make sure that you're stretching out the back. So the idea is not to stretch out the hamstrings, but to articulate the back and round out the back. Okay? And then back in the other direction. So reaching far, good. Gradually increasing the range of motion while you're doing this. So first start nice and easy. Again, if you're feeling pain in this or if you have a history of back problems, you want to actually not do this and make sure that you are okay for articulating the back in this fashion. Okay, so this is forward and back. Once you get to your larger range of motion, you'll notice that you can actually start to increase the level that you're bending. When you notice as you bend back, it actually does engage the core, so it is also strengthening your core muscles. So as you notice, as Victoria bends forward, she's articulating the back, rounding it out as she goes forward, and arching as she moves back. So you don't want to keep the back straight. This is actually deliberately articulating the back, arching and then rounding it out. Good, so now we can also go with side bends. So from side to side, so again, reaching overhead and then reaching off to one side, stretching out the side area here and then to the other side as well. So again, this is also because you're off-centering your upper body weight, it does require you to engage your core. So you are strengthening the side, all the muscles in the side of your body. Okay, so back and forth to the side. And now finally, we're going to move with this oblique stretch. So basically from that overhead stretch, we're going to move in a 45-degree angle back as though you're reaching for something that's behind you and you slightly turn in that direction. Okay, so you have your oblique stretch on both sides. Also going nice and a deliberate slow movement and gradually increasing the range of motion while you're doing this. Now moving on to the hips. So we're going to start with a basic hip roll. So we're going to start with the hands on the hips and then creating small circles while we bend from the hip. So you want to keep the spine relatively immobile while your hips are doing all of the bending. So this is basically where the leg meets your hips. So gradually increasing the circumference here, again moving back to the side and forward. By the time you reach your full mobility, you'll actually be bending completely forward, off to the side as much as possible, and back. This does require a bit of strength when you start to get to the larger range of motion, simply because you do have to stabilize your core. And then of course you can switch directions, going in both directions. Small circles, and gradually increasing the circumference. Again, if you have hip pain, make sure you don't go as far as where you're feeling pain. Only go where it's comfortable. As you warm up, you'll actually feel that you can increase your range of motion, and that's okay as well. But pain is a very important indicator that you don't want to go to that range of motion. Continuing with our hip mobilization exercises, now we're going to isolate to each individual hip. Okay, so standing on one leg, you're going to raise the leg to a roughly 90-degree angle and then create small circles as though you're making a circle with your knee. Okay, so while you're doing this, you want to start to increase the circumference of your circle. So you notice as Victoria's knee passes the center, she's actually going towards the other side, up and back. Good, and you can switch directions. So very important to start with small circles here. Most people's hip flexors are actually fairly weak, so you'll find that you might start to feel some pain or even some cramping here. If that happens, go ahead and stop, rest. You can also, what you can do is keep the knee a little bit lower and make the circles this way rather than raising the knee. Good, so you can switch to the other leg. So bring it up at a 45-degree angle from the floor and then gradually start to increase the circumference of the circle. At your greatest circumference, you want to see if you can bring your knee up as high as possible, as though you're reaching towards your chest. And you can switch directions. And making sure that you do cross the knee as far to one side as possible and then open up as far as possible. This is also working on your balance as well. And good.